226.010 from 1 right, clear for takeoff.
1 right, clear to go, yeah, thank you,
Clear 4461, 1 right, left and wait.
My name is Jason, and this is my illustrious co-host Mark Skyhawk Heavy Deck. We have to my left Mr. Stephen Wilson, our producer for the weekend, and welcome to Flightcast. This episode is brought to you by Flying Development Studio, the makers of the mobile flight sim Infinite Flight. All day, and we're excited here to have with us pilot, writer, and aviation lawyer, Mr. Alan Armstrong.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you for making time for Flightcast today.
You're welcome.
Alan, why don't you give us a little overview of who you are and why you're at Warbird Weekend?
Well, I'm an aviation lawyer, and I fly vintage aircraft. I fly the T6, and I fly the Nakajima Type 97 replica. And I just love old airplanes.
Cool. So you're a member of the CAF?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm one of their pilots.
One of their pilots, okay. Is this I'm curious, I haven't asked anybody this yet, but is that a volunteer position to be a
Yes, it is.
CAF
It is, and you have to meet certain requirements. Not just anybody can fly the airplanes. You have to satisfy experience requirements. You have to be checked out.
Okay.
Take a check ride annually. If you're giving rides to people, you have to participate in drug testing. So it's a fairly disciplined activity. It's not just a casual activity. And
lots of vetting.
Yeah, vetting, and this is not a hobby, okay? You can be casual about a hobby.
It's a serious business.
Flying these airplanes is serious.
Yep.
And if you make a mistake, you're going to kill yourself or kill somebody else. And so we recognize that. We're pretty serious about this. We're pretty disciplined about it. We consider safety to be paramount, and we try to do it right. And that's the philosophy that underpins everything that we do is operational pilots for the Commemorative Air Force.
Okay.
And I'm assuming as well, because of all the stuff that you have to do to qualify to be able to fly for the CAF, just if anything, like you said, all the requirements that y'all have to go through, plus if you also carry passenger, also for the insurance purposes to be able to fly them, I guess. The requirements are pretty stringent for that.
Yeah, there are. These airplanes are 70, 75 years old. These are old machines. We do our very best to keep them up.
And you do a fabulous job.
Well, thank you. But we recognize. I mean, some of these airplanes were dangerous in 1944. They're no less dangerous in 2017. So
because y'all try to keep them as close to the original as possible.
Right. My airplane has original gyros and systems. It's not new equipment, and so you're dealing with technology. In my case, is 74 years old. So you do your very best to keep it up, but there's a lot of maintenance to keeping these things airworthy.
I think the newest bird you have is the 34.
Yes. Right.
And that one's even freshly painted, the yellow one out here. It's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, so there's a lot of effort both by the crew chiefs and the maintenance personnel and by the pilots to keep these things working and operating safely and effectively and efficiently.
If it wasn't for the traffic, I would move back. I would move up here just to be able to come volunteer over at CAF. So
the people we have, I was thinking about that this morning. We have a very high quality of personnel who volunteer for the Commemorative Air Force and the Dixie Wing. I mean,
maybe that's why they haven't asked me.
No. No. That's not. I wasn't going there. I wasn't going there. But what I am trying to say is that the people who are involved, you look at them and they're achieving in their professional lives. They're achieving in the workplace.
Absolutely.
I mean, or if they're retired, they were very effective when they were in working life. So you have a very high caliber of people who want to do this.
And passionate about it.
And they're passionate about it.
Yes.
And everyone's on the same page. Everyone's trying to do it right. Now, because it's a volunteer organization, you can't just command someone to do something. You have to indicate to them that this is in your interest. You have to persuade them or suggest it.
Mandating.
Exactly. So you have to be careful about that. You have to be careful how you handle people.
Mm-hmm.
But taking that into account, if you can get them on that page, and most of them are on that page, they'll do a very, 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 very good job for you.
And one thing I'll just say as a testimony to the CAF Dixie Wing, the times that I've been there to visit, everybody has been just so welcoming with open arms, just willing to bend over backwards to answer any questions for anybody. Just so, what's the word I'm looking for? Hospitable, maybe.
Sure.
Just you guys. I mean, you almost just stop what you're doing, whether you're pulling out a plane, whatever, cleaning a plane, cleaning the leading edge. Someone's in the cockpit working on wiring harnesses, whatever. Everybody's just so willing to just stop, answer any questions that you have. And, of course, we try to be respectful of the time. But it's rare to get that. And like you said, these are all from volunteers. And it's never been short of amazing whenever I go out there and just hang out. So it's been great.
Now, Alan, you handed me this card, and it says Preemptive Strike on the front. Tell us about that.
About the year 2000, I came up with the idea to have a motion picture made about the American volunteer group, the Flying Tigers. So I wrote a 75-page proposal and got it to an agent in L.A. And I had a buddy who's a screenwriter. So I got it to the agent, and she said, tell Alan this will never happen.
Oh.
And then she said, but if he tries to do it, she needs to make it bigger than about the Flying Tigers. And I thought, is she insane? How do you make something bigger than about resigning your commission from the Army or the Navy or the Marine Corps to fly for a foreign warlord? How do you find a story bigger than that? But
yeah.
Anyway, so about the same time that I got this negative from this agent in L.A.,
Pretty strong negative.
Very strong negative.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I've been told throughout my life I can't do things. So every time I'm told I can't do something, I obviously go and do it.
Right.
So a buddy of mine named Tom Pandolfi had just obtained from the Navy, in my book, what are called the Pensacola Papers. And the Pensacola Papers is a collection of random documents that were found in a desk at Pensacola Naval Air Station. In no particular order, but they did talk about, in addition to P-40s going to China, about bombers going to China. So that intrigued me, the fact that bombers were in the discussion in these documents. Mm. So one day, one nice rainy day, I got my dictaphone out, and I got in a conference room, and I got the papers organized chronologically because they were completely randomly. They were not organized at all.
Okay.
So I wrote a summary of them, and as I began to write the summary, bombers and targets, flying distances from China to Kyushu, it began to sink into me that the American Volunteer Group was more than a fighter group. Okay, the first AVG was fighters, correct, but the second AVG was bombers. Okay, so the mission had 3 phases. The first phase was to protect the Burma Road, to keep the supply line open from Rangoon, Burma to Chongqing, China, so that the arms and materiel could flow to the Chinese government. The second phase was to actually bomb and attack Japanese airfields in French Indochina. But the third phase is what lit my fire. The third phase was actual bombing of targets in Japan. And we're talking about before Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow.
This is a paradigm shift. Everything that you think you know about Pearl Harbor, you do not know. And the reason you don't know this is because we began selecting targets in Japan in April of 41.
Wow.
We began our plans to bomb Japan before the Japanese admiral in charge of the fleet commanded that a plan be designed to attack Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow.
Yamamoto's order comes down in January, February of 41. Well, in December of 40, Chenault is meeting with the U.S. government for this bombing campaign plan to be discussed. So our plan actually precedes, it actually antedates the Japanese plan, which I thought was remarkable.
That is a game changer.
It is.
That is.
But let me give you one more game changer. June 3rd, 1941. What happens on June 3rd, 1941? On June 3rd, 1941, American cryptographers decode a purple code message. Now, I'm not talking about JN-24. I'm not talking about the Japanese military code. I'm talking about diplomatic code. Magic, we were reading the Japanese code and intercepting it faster and decoding it faster than they were. Magic in D.C., okay? Wow. We decoded on June 3rd, 1941, a telegram or radio teletype transmission from Tokyo to 5 different offices, embassies in Southeast Asia. And what was the topic of the transmission? The topic was the Japanese knew that we had a plan to bomb them. That radio message was issued June 30, 1941. We read it, May 30, 1941. We read it June 3rd, 1941, which means by June 3rd, 1940, one, we knew that they knew.
Wow.
We knew that they knew on June 3rd, 41, that we had a bombing plan in place to bomb Tokyo and other key cities in Japan. This is a big,
Holy cow.
big. Now Pearl Harbor makes a lot more sense, doesn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they were just trying to beat us to the strike.
Everyone in the know, everyone in the intelligence community knew there was going to be a clash between Japan and America. It didn't take a Phi Beta Kappa
Now,
to figure that out.
yeah.
Everyone knew that was coming, but what is really significant about this code on June 3rd is that we knew that they were aware of our plan. My book is about why the plan was not timely implemented, why it didn't come off, and there were a number of obstacles to the plan being timely executed. There were competing interests between the Chinese government and the British government for Lockheed Hudson aircraft. Great Britain wanted them for coastal command to fly and looking for German U-boats.
Okay.
Chiang Kai-shek wanted Lockheed Hudson's to bomb Kyushu. Now, originally the plan envisioned B-17s, but because of Chennault's checkered past with the Army Air Corps, he wrote a treatise called The Role of Defensive Pursuit. And you may know that one of the basic tenets of American Air Corps, Army Air Corps doctrine in the late 30s and early 40s was, number one, the bomber's always going to get through and the bomber's going to destroy the target. And Chennault said, no, if you give me sufficient fighter aircraft and just give me a telephone warning net, I will deny access to the airspace to the bombers. This is a big no-no. This is a big, big no-no. This is frowned upon by the Air Corps. This man is out of step with official Air Corps doctrine. And to make matters worse, he's an instructor in fighter tactics at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. So they were glad to get rid of him in 1937, and he found employment with Chiang Kai-shek, a foreign warlord in China. So that's the enmity, the anger that Chennault had generated as an Army Air Corps officer haunted him when his plan surfaced to bomb Japan because the Air Corps was reluctant to give him B-17s to attack Japan. So he was left with the rakings and the scrapings, we call it in the South. The rakings and the scrapings being Lockheed Hudson's converted into bombers as opposed to B-17s. Didn't have the range, didn't have the bomb load, and so that he was hobbled with the limitation on being allowed to use Lockheed Hudson's, not B-17s.
Wow. So just a ton of info in this book, and so if anyone's interested in following up on this story, I'm not sure if you guys can see this. It's called Preemptive Strike by Alan Armstrong, and you can go to preemptivestrikethebook.com.
Yes, it's published both in English and in Japanese. It's published in both the United States of America and in Japan.
Okay, and then of course the flyingtigersfilm.com and preemptivestrikethemovie.com.
Yeah, so to come full circle back to the turn down, the rejection from
Yes, please.
from the agent in L.A. So I'm not a screenwriter. I am not a screenwriter, but I did write a screenplay.
Okay.
And it did win the best screenwriting competition in New York.
I'd say you are a screenwriter. Then.
Well, at least I was. And so we had, because it won the best screenplay, we had a reading in New York. We had people dressed up in uniforms, and we had them on the stage, and we actually read the screenplay on the stage in New York City. And of course, the emphasis, the hope was, and this was a gift to me by virtue of having won the screenwriting competition. The hope was that perhaps a producer would see this and would be interested in it, and we'd actually get it picked up. So that hasn't happened.
Okay.
It's about a $60 million adventure to film this.
Oof.
Yeah, I mean we've costed out to see what it's going to require to film this movie. It's about $60 million.
Okay. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
I'd love to see that
Thank
happen.
Do you happen to have any of your books here on at PDK?
I do not. My office is about 2.5 miles due east from here. I have boxes of books in my office. They can be accessed if they're needed.
I would love to get
Okay.
a couple copies
Well,
before
yeah.
we head out.
Yeah, we'll get them.
But for our listeners, preemptivestrikethebook.com, I'm sure
Thank
they
you.
can buy it there,
Yes,
right?
Yes, sir.
So let's go back to you flying for the CAF. Why the T6?
Well, the T6 is it's not the entry level. You have to have T6 time to advance to the Mustang and the Dauntless and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So if you join the commemorative Air Force and you become a pilot, I mean, you can start in the PT-26. There are lower performance aircraft, but the Texan's the one that you want to get your time in because it's a tricky airplane to fly.
Well, why is that?
Okay. Well, it has a big propeller on the front. Okay, it has a lot of gyroscopic activity,
Okay.
a lot of gyroscopic motion. Okay, as you bring the throttle up, you want to be bringing your right foot up too because of the torque.
Yep.
You want to kind of load that right rudder because you're going to have it. I mean, as you bring that throttle up, that airplane's going to want to go to the left. So you want to load that right rudder, or at least be anticipating that.
Okay.
So you want to kind of keep it at pretty much of a 3-point attitude as it accelerates, and just keep it there, and use your peripheral vision to see where the runway is. Make sure you're staying in the center line.
Right.
So
Because you can't see directly.
Exactly. You can't see directly in front of you. So you're running on peripheral, okay, and you want to keep these lines straight because that means you're tracking straight down the runway. So as you're accelerating, you're going to see your airspeed come up, and around 60 or 65 or 70, the controls start to become effective. You may gently bring the stick forward just a skosh to get the tail off the ground.
Okay.
And then in no time at all, she'll be airborne. Okay. One thing you do not want to do is pop that stick forward, because if you pop that stick forward, the nose is going to go to the left.
Okay.
Okay. So you want to be gentle with it because this is a function of gyroscopic precession.
You're saying when you put the nose forward, it's going to go to the left?
If you jam it,
okay.
If you are abrupt with your stick control,
Got it.
you're going to find the aircraft. You're going to have an excursion, be heading towards the grass instead of tracking straight. So you want to lift the tail up, but ever so gently. Okay, you don't want to jam it up. So you got to think about, and when you're landing, if you got the tail up and you slam the stick back in your gut, it's going to go to the right. So you got to think about, for each and every action, the equal opposite reaction. So you want to be a little bit gentle with your stick controls in terms of fore and aft movement, because you don't want to have excursions left or right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, as a tricycle landing gear pilot, which some friends of mine who are tailwheel pilots tell me I'm not a real pilot because I don't fly tailwheel yet. It's an endorsement I definitely want to get, and it just amazes me how you have to put all that into factor.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're not a real pilot. I would never go that far. But what I would say is, that flying a tailwheel aircraft is more demanding.
Oh, absolutely.
Many of the aircraft, you have no forward vision, so you have to run on peripheral. Then you got the considerations of the torque and the P factor also going with it. So you don't want to make abrupt applications to your stick, So those are things that you have to think about when you're taking off and landing these aircraft.
And what about and they're only kidding when they're telling me I'm not a real pilot. It's just
right.
They're just trying to aggravate me. But like when you said when you land and you drop, if you're too abrupt on the tail wheel, and it's going to go to the right. What about if you just drop it down? I mean, do you? I want to say like in the B-17, it has a tail wheel lock, if I'm not mistaken.
The T6 has a tail wheel lock as well.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yes, it has a tail wheel lock, but that's not the issue. What we're trying to teach you if you're a new pilot in the T6, we're trying to teach you can wheel it when you come down the mains and the tail's still up and you allow the tail wheel to drop, or you can 3-point it where you touch down all three wheels at the same time. Okay. The danger is if you're in a wheel landing attitude and the tail is still up, and you decide just to pop the stick back and put the tail down. Well, number one, you may still have flying speed, and you may find yourself flying again when you thought the flight was over. Number one. Number two, if you're abrupt at that application, the nose is going to go to the right. Okay, so you're going to be veering to the right. So this is why we're taught to be fairly gentle with these stick applications.
Well, that makes sense.
To be considerate of, just to think about what you're doing and just not do it.
Well, if you got some time, we can work on my tailwheel endorsement later today.
Okay.
Well, speaking of that, the sun has come out.
It has.
Should you not be flying?
Well, we can certainly do that. We didn't. The forecast was a bit more ominous than it looks right now.
Yeah, it's actually looking pretty nice right now.
Yeah, because the METARs and the TAF was not showing in the favor of any of this today.
Yeah, the max we're looking at was like 2,500, maybe 3,500 foot ceiling, and then the winds are supposed to be 120 at 130 at 8 gusting to 20. So that's what, but it's not that ominous. It's not that.
No, it certainly doesn't look that way now. That's for
it looks
sure.
nice. Yeah.
So you said your primary job is aviation lawyer.
Right.
Tell us about that. What does that involve?
Well, there's a misapprehension that all my clients are are scumbags and dirtbags. If they're
Violators.
exactly. If they're accused of a violation of the FARs, they must be bad pilots. And I've had pilots that I've represented with 18 combat medals. I mean, air medals, distinguished flying crosses. These are not inexperienced aviators.
They're not hacks.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. What I've come to appreciate is something can happen really, really fast to anybody.
Well, take the Harrison Ford when he landed on the taxiway
So
as a prime example. I mean,
Yeah.
I would not call him inexperienced pilot whatsoever.
no. So first of all, something unexpected can happen to anyone, and because you make a decision that ATC doesn't agree with, now you're in trouble.
Right.
Okay, that's the first point. The second point is, pilot when there's an event. Okay, there's an occurrence. It's either an operational error or a pilot deviation. Operational error is ATC's problem. Pilot deviation is your problem as a pilot.
Right.
But sometimes what is portrayed as a pilot deviation is really an operational error. They really gave him a clearance he couldn't comply with, or they didn't express the clearance properly. They gave him a heading, but they didn't say left or right. He turned left, they meant right. So that does happen sometimes, and so sometimes ATC will portray you as the violator, as the culprit, when in fact they have as much responsibility in the event as you do. And so one of my jobs is to tease that out, to analyze this, either based upon my own experience or based upon the experience of experts that I retain, and we have to get into the case and find out it's not really his fault after all. This really is an operational error, not a pilot deviation.
Right.
I see that not infrequently. Okay.
And who's representing the air traffic controllers in that situation? Do
The
they have
FAA, the FAA lawyers. Okay.
So is that a daunting proposition? Like, do they have the big teams of lawyers for the FAA?
The FAA has all the assets at their disposal that they require. And not only do they have all the assets they require, they actually control the witnesses. They're employed by the government. So don't think that witness is going to do a mea culpa and say, oh, gee, it's really my fault, I'm sorry.
Right.
That is not going to happen, okay? They're going to ensure that he toes the party line and blames the pilot and doesn't take any responsibility himself.
Right.
But that's got to be crazy, though, because y'all have to listen to all the tapes.
We do have to review the tapes.
Everything, and I can imagine just the time it takes to sit there and investigate all that.
Well, yeah, the way it works is you're going to get tape recordings, and you're going to get a plot. You're going to get a radar printout plot that's going to give you a hit every 6 seconds, because that's how often the radar sweeps the target. Okay,
Right.
and you're going to get lat-long changes in the direction and altitude of the aircraft every 6 seconds, and you can compare that to any other aircraft with which it may have come in conflict with by virtue of physical proximity, and you have to correlate that to the tape to see what is he doing in relation to what they're saying. Okay, so you have to run that.
So there's a lot of cross-checking and
a lot of fact-checking, very detailed work. You have to do that to figure out is it an operational error or a pilot deviation. Yeah.
if you're hiring, I'd love to come work for you.
It's really cool stuff. It's
Yeah.
really cool stuff.
Yeah, with your law degree.
I'll work on it.
Okay.
So we had a case where we got the raw data, but they had the capability to convert that 6 second plot into a continuous stream of data that was more digestible, and they refused to do that. They gave it to us in basic raw data form as opposed to digested form. So we had to go out and buy the software ourselves and convert it into data that we could make something out of. We could make
Nice
some
of 'em.
yeah, very nice.
Well,
of
they
them.
want to make it as difficult for you as they can.
Exactly right. Exactly. And it did turn out that there was some air traffic control complicity, of course, in the event, as we expected.
That's
Mark,
crazy.
do you have any other questions for Alan?
I'm glad I met you today. I hope I never need you, other than in the T6.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about writing an article. What happens when it happens to you? Not if, when.
When?
Because here's the deal. If you practice medicine long enough, you'll be sued for malpractice.
For something.
There's no question about it,
Yep.
okay? If you practice law long enough, you'll meet a bar complaint. It's just inevitable. And if you fly long enough, you'll have a violation.
Yep.
It's just an occupational hazard. You have to accept the risk.
And if you fly an amphibious aircraft long enough, you will land with your gear up.
And if you and a retract, they say that you'll land with your gear up too. So you have to be mindful of that. Really, really good guys can make a mistake in a moment, and
Sure.
and then we're off the
anybody
races.
can.
But
yeah.
that's, and we, for example, we have a guy down in Mobile. I'm not going to mention his name, but he is. We call him Dr. Destructo. People will probably know in Mobile who that is.
You've talked about him on Flightcast, yeah.
And he doesn't pre-flight his aircraft whatsoever. He does. He lives in Mobile, and he's a doctor in Mobile, but he does a lot of moonlighting in different cities. And it's nothing for him to just hop in the plane, not even pre-flight. I've seen him taxi at 50 knots to the runway, get on the runway, throttle up, and he's trying to do all this before ATC opens up. Throttles up, gets off the ground, lands right away, taxis in to get fuel. Okay? But I don't know how many gear-up landings he's had. There's a story about how he landed in a city just north of Mobile, didn't lower the gear in his aircraft. He had the mechanics come out, jack it up, lower the gear. He went into town, got a hacksaw, cut the Q-tips off.
Well, I'm sure the FAA would be very interested in talking to him.
Well, and what he does when ATC is active at the field, they just pretty much stop everything. They're just like, he's going to eventually do something that we don't want him to hurt anybody else. I mean, he will sit there, take off, basically get into ground effect, raise the gear, stay at that altitude to the end of the runway, and then just pitch up like he's a Blue Angel and go. So they just let him go and do his thing, and it's like you said, it's not if, it's when. And he's probably got more gear-up landings than he actually does real, actual gear-down landings.
Yeah.
So.
He sounds like a future client.
And
we'll
actually,
give him your card.
Yeah.
Alan, anything you want to share with viewers before we let you go?
Well, I want to make a pitch for the Commemorative Air Force. I want to encourage people to look at the program, to look at the organization, to see if you have an interest in it, to see if it's right for you, because if you do participate, I find it very, very rewarding.
Very nice. And I think they can go to, is it it's dixiewing.org?
Yes.
Right. So
Great group of people. You'll love it. Everyone talks aviation. Everyone speaks aviation.
Yeah.
It's a very understandable language among the members.
Yeah.
It's a great group of people.
A lot of people I've met there who are not pilots, but they just have that passion.
You don't have to be a pilot. You may be an historian. You may be a mechanic. You may be a public relations person.
Or just an
You may be a
enthusiast.
marketing person. You may be whatever. But I can tell you, if you're in the Dixie wing of the CAF, you'll have a great time.
Very nice.
Absolutely.
Alan, thank you so much
You're
for
very welcome.
spending some time with us.
Yes, thank you.
To our viewers, this has been Flightcast Live at PDK here in Atlanta, Georgia. This episode is brought to you by the makers of the mobile flight sim Infinite Flight, Flying Development Studio. So on behalf of Mark and Steven and myself, thanks for watching, and happy landings. See you next time.
Thank you, man.